Hey everybody, time for another 3 at 3 on Solar PV. I'm Jen Runyon, Chief Editor of Renewable Energy World.
And I'm Paula Mintz, Chief Market Research Analyst, SPV Market Research.
Hey Paula, battling some sickness.
Yeah, a little getting over the flu,
Ugh, poor
but
thing.
3 at 3 never sleeps.
It doesn't. And we've got a good show today. We're going to talk about the unintended consequences of solar, of low prices, of tariffs, all these things that are taking place here. And let's start with a video that I discovered on LinkedIn this week that we'll have below the show. But basically, the video shows villagers in India taking hammers to a field of solar. It's a hundred,
Yeah.
reportedly 100 megawatt solar array, and they are just smashing these panels, smash, 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 lots of them, screaming and yelling and continuing to smash. I had a friend translate what they were saying. They're saying, "Break the panels, break the panels."
It, they're, so I know because we've talked about this, and it's sort of an unintended consequence of our very low prices because that drives everything. People don't realize just announcing low tender bids and that win. It means somewhere along the line, corners are going to be cut. You have to have cheap land. You have to have this. You have to have that. And where does that cheap land come from?
Yeah.
Let's face it. It doesn't just appear. It's not just laying there waiting for someone to use.
Exactly, exactly. And so I did, in the digging that I've done for this, it's unclear to me if these are people who either worked on the array themselves, helping to install it, and were not paid, or they were farmers. And I think this is the more likely story. They were farmers whose land this was, and they were not paid an appropriate amount for their land. And again, this is what we get when we get all excited about these really low prices for these giant
Right.
solar arrays. Someone's gonna be harmed. Someone could be getting harmed in that. And I think this video is, to me, a really good example of what happened. These people are being exploited and they are really mad.
It's taking a look at Saudi Arabia right now. They accepted a bid from a domestic developer that was higher than the low bid, and
Mm.
that's probably a good trend, but it's still too low.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the point is that we keep looking forward and thinking, okay, how much cheaper can we possibly get? Meanwhile, I know that one group, and I have to do a little digging on this, went back to FERC in the U.S. and insisted on being paid. This is a conventional energy
Okay.
system, insisted on being paid a little more towards market rates, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at the fact that most people in the world need to make a margin to keep going because most companies do realize that every push down on the revenue and margin side trickles, 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 all the way down to, people who cannot afford to take the hit,
Yeah.
like farmers who are sustenance farmers who may do well one year, do nothing the next year, and rely on this land. So
Absolutely.
if and I know you've done more digging on this, and it's something we love to talk about. We've talked about this a lot. We love to talk about how cheap. It's like, oh, look at this, it's a record low.
Solar's better. Solar's beating gas. Solar's beating coal. We love to say these things, and because we do. But the unintended consequences are that someone could be getting screwed.
Exactly. And also that every place on the chain, any little tiny disruption throws everything out of whack.
Yeah.
I mean, what if there's a storm and everything gets blown off its posts? That happens a lot. We
Yeah.
have climate change, extreme weather now. What if there's curtailment? What if you've cut corners during installation and the system's just not performing? What if, what if, what if? I mean, we're dancing on the head of a pin here. You bid so low that everything then has to be perfect, but you have cut, but potentially enough corners have been cut so it's not. And then again, there are these people on the other end
Right.
that are relying on, this is their land. Now their land has been taken, and governments do that all the time, all over the world.
Yep.
And they're left with what? So then I mean, this was always a problem in the developing world. I've written about it
Yeah.
for like 2 decades.
Yeah.
Is that sometimes you install the it's village grids, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
microgrids are not new.
Yeah, right.
You would install the village grid, and somebody gets pissed because they're not getting as much power as they assumed they would get, or the system isn't functioning the way they assumed it would, or it's just shiny, and they break them or they steal them.
Yeah.
So this has happened for decades in the solar industry, but this in particular is taking advantage of the poor, and it's
right. I mean, and you've talked about as well, you've written about it in the manufacturing side as well, as the manufacturers work to get their prices low. What's happening to their laborers? What's happening on those factory floors to get those super low prices?
And what's happening to quality control? What
Right.
if you're on a cell line and at the end it's just visual? That's not good enough.
Yeah.
What if it's, just one camera at the end of the line? That's not good enough. What if you're rushing through pilot scale because you just do not have the time? You've got to get that line up and commercial. And we have all begun to say this is progress, that you're doing it faster. Faster isn't necessarily progress.
Right.
Faster is just faster.
Right.
There's not a judgment on faster. Sometimes faster can be bad.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, yes, I know when I rush through things, I often make many, many errors.
Me too. Yeah.
Let's switch to these impending steel tariffs. So we have more potential tariffs that could hurt the solar industry, and these are on steel and aluminum. Once again, this is one of those big global laws that Trump is, or that is being used by these industries, so that the decision is going to go to Trump. And you were telling me, 80%? That's what he has the right to enact?
This goes back to the Trade Expansion Act of 1962,
Okay.
which was signed into law by President Kennedy. The reason for this act was to give presidents of the United States the right to negotiate tariffs up to 80%, not to impose tariffs, by the way, but as a negotiating tool.
Interesting.
And this is what he wrote when he signed it. This act recognizes fully and completely that we cannot protect our economy by stagnating behind tariff walls, but that the best protection possible is a mutual lowering of tariff barriers among friendly nations so that all may benefit from a free flow of goods. It goes on, increased economic activity, blah, 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 provide more job opportunities. So the point is, the unintended consequence of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 is that years down the line it can be used as a cudgel, which is, like a cudgel.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening now. And you can look at many examples. I know we've talked about Smoot-Hawley, and I've written about Smoot-Hawley. That was, around the Depression time, when it was supposed to be a tariff on imported agriculture and turned into a tariff on pretty much everything, and led to a trade war. So we can assume, and President Trump himself was quoted just a couple of weeks ago about steel tariffs, saying, you may have higher prices, but you will have jobs. So we don't know what the fiscal impact on solar will be, but we have to assume it's somewhere in the range of 1 to maybe 5 cents even. So you really don't know. It's just like the modules. There's a lot of conjecture about what that's going to mean.
Yeah, can the manufacturers absorb it? Can they not? Will they pass it along? I mean, right, all that.
And it, on the absorbing side, it depends what price they ship the module into the U.S., right?
Yeah.
Or will they ship them all through India?
Yeah.
Will you have a boom in module assembly? It'd be quicker to get it up there. It might be I would just say there would be some quality issues. So, okay. I mean, but with the steel tariffs, it's one more blow to an industry we've talked about where the margins are really thin. And it also, let's face it, it is sort of setting the U.S. up against pretty much everybody else in the world, and there will be a trade war. Right now, countries are lining up at the WTO over the module and steel tariffs.
Yes, they are.
They're definitely going to line up over this. Will really make them mad. Yeah. Plus, there's aluminum. right?
I mean,
So,
and the interesting part, just going back around, is what you were explaining is that this was meant as a strategic law to give the president the power to negotiate, not necessarily to impose these tariffs. And yet that's what's happened.
and the lesson here, and it's a lesson that people need to relearn about governments, because government giveth, government taketh away. The the intention of this act, even though pretty quickly, as with Smoot-Hawley, all these little things were added, right, to it. So little clauses, etc. And the one that's being used right now is that the imports of steel are a danger to our national defense. It's a very thin argument. So it will go to the WTO, and there will be, but so, but the point is, just because President Kennedy said that he wanted to give presidents a negotiating tool and the ability to sort of threaten this, doesn't mean that many decades later, Mr. Trump will not say, "Great, I can do it. I'm doing it."
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he's obviously looking at this completely differently. So he's not looking at let's try to get a fair deal and avoid tariffs. As President Kennedy clearly wrote, he's saying, nope, it's America first, and shut our borders, and let's pay more, but you'll have jobs. I don't think that's necessarily a one-to-one here. Will there be jobs? Maybe not. If you look at the trends over time, and I'd of course have to really look into the statistics, tariffs do not lead to more U.S. jobs. Over time, no, does not happen.
Yeah, I know. In my investigations as well, I've talked to a few companies, racking companies, and they have said the same thing. You know, they feel that these are definitely not going to lead to any kind of jobs that President Trump might be looking to add.
Well, he's not looking to add in solar, let's be honest.
Well, also true, right. So
and there are also aluminum tariffs, which affects the module assemblers.
Yeah.
So here's the irony here. I mean, the solar tariffs, right? We're supposed to spur new jobs and manufacturing in the U.S., and now you've added cost, right? So you made it more costly for them to open module assembly facilities here. And let's not forget, this is an ITC driven market, right? ITC is going down.
Yeah.
We have to hope that there will be congressional will to extend again, maybe bump it back up after 2020 or the 2018 election. Well, it would have to be after 2020. Maybe indeed we could get a permanent ITC at some rate, right, above 10%. Instead of it going away. But you have to look at the U.S. market, and you have to say, and this is what people starting businesses will do. Okay, so the costs have now gone up here, and God knows what else is going to happen. Mm-hmm. So what else a tariff will be applied to? I mean, I don't know what else it can do to us, quite frankly. But so you look at that and you say, does the U.S. market have legs? It has legs this far. Okay, you look at the DG market, you say, what about net metering, et cetera, and storage? How long can that go on? That's going to be affected too. You know, like I said, goodness knows what he will try to apply tariff to next. Then you say, Canada. Will Canada ever really boom the way Canada was assumed to boom? That's not a reason to build manufacturing here. Latin America, you have to say, okay, this market with really low bidding on tenders, which takes us right back to our beginning. And also people with land and farmers who could be affected by land grabs, government land grabs, okay?
Yep.
So you go, and historically unstable economies. So you look at that and you say, well, that's really booming now, but will it boom forever? Is that going to support my manufacturing? And that's what manufacturers will look at. So it's ironic that he has imposed tariffs on solar, supposedly so there will be more jobs here. Meanwhile, cutting the budget or wanting to cut the budget for clean energy and solar research by over 70%. Meanwhile, adding tariffs on steel and aluminum, which directly add costs to those installing, manufacturing, mounting, and assembly.
Yeah.
Not the intendant. extension of the Trade Expansion Act of
Yeah.
1962.
Yeah, good point. And that's all the time we have, but we'll see you next time on 3 at 3 on Solar PV. Bye.